There comes a moment in every woman's life where she realizes this isn't about them anymore. It's about her peace, her power, her boundaries, her evolution. And somewhere deep inside, something clicks. She stops explaining herself. She stops shrinking to make others feel comfortable. She stops engaging in battles she never asked for. That's the moment she becomes dangerous, not to the world, but to every toxic person who once relied on her silence. You see, there's a kind of woman who doesn't yell, doesn't chase, and doesn't play games. She doesn't get caught up in drama, and she refuses to let chaos live rent-free in her mind. But here's what most people don't understand. She wasn't always like that. She became that way. She learned, she evolved, she unlearned everything that made her a target for toxicity, and she rewired her entire approach to dealing with people who drained her. Toxic people don't fear confrontation. They fear clarity. They fear calm strength. They fear a woman who looks them in the eye and says, "No more. And what if I told you you could become that woman, not by changing who you are, but by returning to who you were before the world taught you to tolerate what you never deserved?" Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't theory, it's strategy. And it will shift how you handle every manipulator, every narcissist, every energy vampire, and every person who thinks they can control your emotions. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about bitterness. This is about reclaiming your peace, your worth, your power. You ready? Let's begin. Toxic people thrive on one thing: your reaction. That's their fuel. They poke, they prod, they say just the right words to get under your skin. And the moment you flinch, defend yourself, cry, argue, or try to prove a point, they know they've won. They don't care if you yell, scream, or plead. In fact, they want you to. Because every emotional outburst makes you look unstable and makes them look in control. But a high-value woman sees right through that game. She doesn't react, she observes. And that alone changes everything. When you stop reacting emotionally, you begin to see people for who they really are, not who they pretend to be when they want something from you. A high-value woman has trained herself not to internalize someone else's chaos. Instead of thinking, "Why are they treating me like this?" she steps back and calmly asks, "What does this reveal about them?" That question alone shifts you from victim to observer, and observers hold the power. You have to understand emotional control is one of the most underutilized forms of strength. It's not loud, it doesn't come with applause, it's quiet, strategic, intentional. Toxic people want you to become emotional because they know once you're emotional, you're easier to manipulate, you're less logical, you're more desperate, and you start fighting battles you didn't even sign up for. But a woman of value knows her energy is currency, and she doesn't spend it where it's not appreciated or respected. She knows that not everything deserves a response. Not every jab requires a comeback. Some things are better answered with silence, because silence in the right hands is loud. It makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to sit with their own behavior. When you respond calmly or not at all, you interrupt the cycle of toxicity. You remove their control. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or pretend to be unbothered when you're hurting. It means you recognize that your emotions are sacred and you decide who gets access to them. Most toxic people haven't earned that right. Just because someone tries to provoke you doesn't mean you owe them your peace. Just because someone pushes your buttons doesn't mean you have to explode. You can feel anger and still respond with power. You can feel disappointment and still walk away with dignity. The high-value woman studies people, not to judge them, but to understand their patterns. She watches how they speak, how they shift blame, how they avoid responsibility. She listens more than she talks. She watches more than she reacts. And in doing so, she learns everything she needs to know without giving away an ounce of her control. This kind of woman knows the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional reactivity. She doesn't let someone's insult ruin her entire day. She doesn't allow a disrespectful message to make her question her worth. She doesn't sit up at night trying to decode mixed signals or read between the lines of passive-aggressive behavior. She takes people at face value, and if that value is low, she distances herself without drama. And here's the secret. When you stop giving people the emotional reactions they crave, they start to lose interest. Not because you're boring, but because you've become unmanageable. You've become immune to the tactics they use to control others. You've removed their power source. That's the shift. That's the transformation. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's powerful. And it requires an incredible amount of self-awareness because it's tempting to snap back. It's tempting to prove your point. It's tempting to say, I'm not going to let them get away with this. But the truth is, they already lose the moment you decide not to give them access to your emotional space. This level of control isn't easy, it's a skill. And it's built over time. It comes from getting hurt and choosing to learn. It comes from being drained and deciding never again. It comes from years of observing patterns and recognizing what peace feels like. Once you've tasted peace, chaos becomes repulsive. You stop chasing answers. You stop defending yourself. You stop hoping people will change. You simply observe, adjust, and move on. And what's beautiful about this is when you master emotional discipline, you start to attract a different kind of energy. You become magnetic, not because you're perfect, but because you're centered. You carry a presence that says, I don't need to yell, I don't need to prove, I know who I am. And that kind of energy is rare. It's untouchable, it commands respect without demanding it. So if you're dealing with toxic people right now, don't match their chaos. Don't lower yourself to their level. Step back, breathe, observe, let them reveal themselves, let them expose their own patterns. And while they're busy trying to get a rise out of you, you'll be rising above them, unshaken, unmoved, and more powerful than they ever expected. You don't need to be louder, you need to be clearer. You don't need to be tougher, you need to be wiser. Let them talk, let them spin their stories, let them play their games, because the moment you stop reacting, they lose their script. And when they lose their script, you take control of the narrative. That is how high-value women handle toxic people, not with rage, but with radical composure. There is something undeniably powerful about a woman who says no and doesn't flinch, who draws a line, not to push others away, but to protect herself, and doesn't feel the need to explain it to anyone. That kind of woman is unshakable. She understands that boundaries are not barriers. They are filters, filters that separate what serves her from what slowly destroys her. And when it comes to toxic people, boundaries aren't optional, they're survival. Most people aren't used to women who say what they mean and mean what they say. They're used to women who over-accommodate, who bend to make others comfortable, who say yes when they want to say no. But a high-value woman doesn't live in fear of disappointing people. She doesn't soften her boundaries to make room for dysfunction. She doesn't feel guilty for outgrowing relationships, conversations, or environments that drain her. Her boundary is her peace, and she protects it like her life depends on it, because it does. The truth is, if you're constantly exhausted, resentful, or anxious around certain people, it's not because you're doing too much. It's because you're giving too much of yourself to people who've never earned that access. And no matter how kind, compassionate, or loving you are, if you don't set boundaries, you will be used. Not always maliciously, but inevitably. People take what you allow. And if you don't define the limits, someone else will define them for you. Toxic people don't respect hints. They don't respond to vague suggestions. They push, they test, they manipulate. And if you don't hold your line, they'll inch past it until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. But when you're a woman who knows her worth, you understand that saying no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require a backstory. It doesn't need a reason. And it doesn't need to be followed with, I hope that's okay. Your boundary doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs to be enforced. And here's the part most people struggle with. Setting the boundary isn't the hardest part. It's maintaining it, especially when people push back. Especially when they accuse you of being cold, selfish, or mean. Especially when they guilt trip you with lines like, you've changed, or I thought you cared. But you can't let their discomfort sabotage your healing. You can't let their resistance make you doubt yourself. Because the only people who get angry about your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. The high-value woman doesn't lower her standards because someone else refuses to rise. She doesn't allow toxic people to rent space in her life because she feels bad. She knows the difference between kindness and self-betrayal. She understands that guilt is not a sign she's doing something wrong. It's a sign she's breaking a cycle. And breaking a cycle will always be uncomfortable at first, especially when you're used to being the one who says yes, keeps the peace, and carries the emotional weight of every relationship. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for how others feel about your boundaries. You are only responsible for setting them. You are not here to babysit someone else's feelings. You are not here to explain why you're choosing peace. You are not here to rescue people from the consequences of their own behavior. When someone shows you who they are, believe it and act accordingly. Protecting your peace is not punishment, it's protection. It's not about being rude, it's about being clear. It's not about being harsh, it's about being honest. And it's not about building walls, it's about choosing who gets to enter your sacred space. That's what boundaries are. Emotional gates. And you, not anyone else, are the gatekeeper. The more you practice this, the stronger you become. You stop feeling the need to respond to every call. You stop apologizing for not showing up when you're depleted. You stop engaging in conversations that only drain and confuse you. You realize that your energy is precious, and you no longer feel the need to justify how you choose to spend it. People will notice the change. Some will respect it, some will resist it, some will walk away, but the ones who are meant to stay in your life will never ask you to abandon yourself in order to keep them. They'll respect your boundaries because they respect you, and they'll admire the strength it took to honor your own needs instead of being consumed by theirs. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them question it. Let them call you selfish. That's not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is to the version of you who stayed silent for too long, the version of you who gave everything and asked for nothing, the version of you who tolerated behavior that broke your heart because you didn't want to cause conflict. You owe it to her to stand up now. And once you do, everything changes. You start to breathe easier, you sleep deeper, you feel lighter, because you're no longer carrying people who refuse to carry themselves. You're no longer tolerating conversations that leave you questioning your worth. You're no longer participating in your own erosion. You've stopped abandoning yourself to make others feel secure. And that is a form of self-respect that toxic people can never understand, but that doesn't mean you owe them an explanation. Your peace is not up for negotiation, your standards are not up for debate, and your energy is not up for grabs. If someone wants access to you, let them earn it. If they cross a line, let them know. And if they continue to disrespect it, let them go. Because when you set boundaries without guilt or apology, you don't just protect your peace, you reclaim your power. And that is what makes you unstoppable. One of the most powerful moments in a woman's life is when she finally understands this truth. It is not her job to fix, change, or rescue anyone, especially toxic people. That moment, though often born from pain and exhaustion, becomes the beginning of her freedom, because for too long, high empathy, high capacity women are taught that love means sacrifice, that being good means always being available, always forgiving, always understanding, even when it's destroying her. But that is not strength. That is self-abandonment. Toxic people are masters of manipulation, and they know exactly how to position themselves as wounded, broken, or in need of saving. They pull you in with stories that tug at your compassion, make you feel like you're the only one who gets them, or convince you that if you leave them, you're abandoning someone who's already hurting. And you, being the deeply caring woman that you are, believe that if you just love them hard enough, if you just stay long enough, if you just give more of yourself, they'll change. But they won't, because they don't want to. What they want is control. What they want is your energy. What they want is a constant flow of forgiveness without accountability. They don't need healing. They need an audience in. And every time you try to rescue them, what you're really doing is volunteering to drown with someone who has no intention of swimming. A high-value woman sees this. She may have fallen into the trap before, trying to be the hero, trying to be the healer, but now she knows better. She knows that no matter how much love she pours into someone, if that person is committed to dysfunction, no amount of patience or loyalty will reach them. She doesn't waste her energy trying to be a solution to someone who doesn't see a problem with their behavior. You see, toxic people don't change because you love them. They change when they choose to. And most of them won't because the chaos works for them. It keeps people confused. It keeps people on edge. It keeps you dancing between hope and heartbreak. But the high-value woman stops dancing. She stands still. She sees the pattern, and she makes a decision not to fix the toxic person, but to fix the part of her that thought she had to. It's a hard truth to swallow, especially for women who were raised to be caregivers, peacemakers, or emotional anchors for others. But you can be kind and still have boundaries. You can be compassionate and still walk away. You can love someone and still choose yourself. Just because you understand someone's pain doesn't mean you're responsible for carrying it. You are not their therapist. You are not their savior. You are not their emotional crutch. And the moment you stop trying to fix them, you give yourself the space to heal yourself. Because the truth is, trying to fix someone else is often a distraction from fixing what's broken inside of you. The need to be needed, the fear of being alone, the desire to prove your worth through loyalty. Those are the wounds that toxic people exploit. And those are the wounds a high-value woman chooses to confront. She learns to redirect her energy inward. She asks, why do I keep attracting people who drain me? She asks, what part of me thinks I have to earn love by suffering for it? She starts doing the work to rebuild her self-worth, not on the shaky foundation of someone else's acceptance, but on the solid ground of her own truth. And here's the beauty in it all. When you stop trying to save others, you save yourself. You save your time. You save your emotional energy. You save your sanity. You stop being on the roller coaster of someone else's inconsistency and start living a life of peace, stability, and clarity. You no longer feel guilty for not answering the call. You no longer feel obligated to explain your absence. You no longer feel the need to prove your loyalty to someone who never earned it. Instead, you show up for yourself. You protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. You surround yourself with people who bring peace, not chaos. People who take responsibility, not just make excuses. People who want to grow with you, not people who expect you to carry them. That is the new standard. That is the new normal. Some may call it selfish. Let them, because the same people who once took advantage of your selflessness will always be the first to call you selfish. The moment you stop giving them unlimited access to your life, let them be uncomfortable with your growth. Let them gossip. Let them twist the story. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your mental health. You're no longer the fixer. You're no longer the emotional sponge. You're no longer the one holding everything together while you fall apart inside. That chapter is over. You've turned the page, and now you're the woman who chooses herself, who heals herself, who frees herself. And in doing so, you give permission to every other woman silently suffering under the weight of toxic loyalty to do the same. Because love doesn't mean losing yourself. Compassion doesn't mean carrying someone else's damage. And strength isn't in how much you can endure. It's in knowing when to let go. So stop trying to save them. Save yourself. That's where the real healing begins. There's a quiet kind of power in a woman who speaks with clarity, calmness, and conviction. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to dominate the room. But when she speaks, people stop and listen, not because she's loud, but because she's clear. That's the kind of voice toxic people fear the most. Not the screaming, not the emotional outbursts, but the composed, unwavering tone that says, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of walking away, and I will not tolerate this. For far too long, women have been conditioned to stay silent, to avoid conflict, to be nice, to go along just to keep the peace. And toxic people love that, because silence is the playground of manipulation. When you don't speak up, you become easier to control. You become the one who carries resentment while they carry on without accountability. But a high-value woman doesn't live in silence. She's done shrinking. She's done suppressing. She's done avoiding hard conversations. Now she uses her voice not as a weapon, but as a shield. The key is not in how loud you speak, it's in how certain you are of what you say. Confidence doesn't require volume. It requires alignment. A woman who knows her worth doesn't shout to be heard. She speaks once and she means it. That terrifies toxic people because their entire strategy depends on confusion, on spinning narratives, on making you doubt yourself. But a woman who speaks directly, calmly, and truthfully leaves no room for their games. She doesn't argue. She asserts. She doesn't beg. She sets terms. She doesn't threaten. She promises, if this continues, I will remove myself. And when she says it, she follows through. Speaking up doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to stay quiet when something feels wrong. It's saying, I'm not okay with that, even when your voice shakes. It's asking hard questions like, can you explain what you meant by that? Or why do you think it's acceptable to speak to me that way? It's not about being aggressive. It's about being present in your power. It's choosing not to let moments of disrespect slide, just to avoid discomfort. It's about having your own back, even if nobody else does. One of the most damaging myths women are sold is that being direct makes them rude or difficult. That's a lie used to keep you compliant. You can be kind and still be assertive. You can be respectful and still say no. You can be graceful and still hold people accountable. These things are not mutually exclusive. And the more you use your voice, the more you realize that speaking up isn't about being liked. It's about being respected. Toxic people will always try to twist your words, gaslight your memory, and deflect responsibility. But when you speak from a place of calm strength, you become immovable. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to debate your worth. You simply state your truth and stand in it. Let them get flustered. Let them try to provoke you. When you stay calm, they lose control because they're not used to women who won't take the bait. There's power in not matching someone's chaos. When someone comes at you with anger, manipulation, or passive aggression, and you meet them with steady truth, they start to unravel. They can't figure out how to control you anymore. You become a mirror to their dysfunction, and that, right there, is where you win. Not by yelling, not by getting even, but by staying rooted in who you are and refusing to lower yourself to meet their drama. But using your voice also means being honest with yourself. It means speaking your truth even when no one else is around to hear it. It means saying this isn't right and acting on it. It means listening to that inner voice that's been whispering to you for years, that voice you've ignored in favor of keeping the peace or protecting someone else's feelings. A high-value woman doesn't betray her own intuition just to avoid uncomfortable conversations. She honors what she feels and she expresses it with grace, but without apology. And yes, it will be hard at first. Your voice may shake, your hands may tremble, your heart might race. That's okay. Strength doesn't mean absence of fear. It means doing it anyway. And every time you speak up, it gets easier. You start to reclaim parts of yourself you forgot you had. You begin to walk taller, speak clearer, and breathe deeper. Because you're no longer silencing yourself for the comfort of others. You're no longer carrying unspoken truths that weigh you down. You're no longer sacrificing your voice just to be accepted. Let them call you too much. Let them say you've changed. Let them walk away. The people who are meant to be in your life will never be threatened by your truth. They will respect it. They will make space for it. And the ones who don't, let them go, because your voice is not too loud. It's been silent for too long. You don't need to yell to be powerful. You just need to mean what you say. Let your tone carry truth. Let your presence command respect. Let your words reflect your values, your boundaries, and your non-negotiables. And if someone tries to silence you, manipulate you, or shame you into being small again, use your voice to say the most powerful words of all, not anymore. This is how high-value women handle toxicity. Not with chaos, not with emotional war, but with calm clarity, with courageous honesty, with the unapologetic strength to speak up even when it's hard, because their peace matters, their truth matters, and most importantly, they matter. There comes a point in every strong woman's journey when she realizes the most powerful move she can make is to walk away. Not with rage, not with chaos, not with long speeches or dramatic exits, but quietly, clearly, and completely. She doesn't slam the door, she closes it with intention. And once it's closed, she never looks back. Not because she's cold, not because she doesn't care, but because she's finally learned that her peace is worth more than someone else's chaos. Walking away doesn't mean she didn't love. It doesn't mean she didn't try. In fact, it usually means she gave everything, too much, even to someone who never appreciated her worth. It means she showed up when she was tired. She forgave when she shouldn't have. She explained herself over and over, hoping they'd finally get it. She believed in their potential, not their patterns. But eventually, even the most compassionate woman gets tired, not of loving, but of begging to be loved properly in return. A high-value woman knows that staying in toxic spaces doesn't make her loyal. It makes her unavailable to the life she deserves. She doesn't fear being alone. She fears living a life that constantly asks her to settle, to shrink, to second-guess herself. So when she walks away, she's not escaping. She's elevating. She's making a declaration, not just to the world, but to herself, that she will no longer tolerate disrespect, emotional manipulation, or half-hearted effort. Toxic people don't expect you to walk away. They expect you to stay, to keep tolerating, to keep giving, to keep explaining, apologizing, and compromising your boundaries. They expect you to need them. That's why walking away is such a power move, because it disrupts the pattern they depend on. When you walk, you take their control with you. You remove their audience, you shatter the illusion that they can treat you any way they want and still have access to you. This decision doesn't come easy. It takes strength to choose yourself. When everything inside you wants to believe they'll change, it takes courage to let go of potential and accept the reality of who someone has consistently shown themselves to be. And it takes deep self-respect to say, I deserve better, not just in words, but in action. The walkaway moment isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like no longer answering the phone, no longer reacting to the bait, no longer explaining why you're pulling back. It's in the small shifts, the boundaries, the silence, the absence. And suddenly the toxic person starts to feel it. Your energy is gone. Your emotional availability is gone. Your willingness to tolerate the disrespect is gone. And they panic, not because they miss you, but because they miss the access to your strength, your loyalty, your emotional labor. But the high-value woman doesn't return, because she knows what happens when she goes back. It starts again, the lies, the cycles, the disappointment, and this time she's done sacrificing her sanity for someone else's dysfunction. She no longer confuses pain with purpose. She no longer thinks love means staying. No matter how deeply it hurts, she now knows that walking away isn't quitting, it's healing, it's reclaiming her narrative, it's saying, I matter even if you don't see it. And yes, there will be moments of doubt, moments when she remembers the good times, the laughter, the connection, but she also remembers the gaslighting, the emotional roller coasters, the feeling of walking on eggshells. She remembers who she became trying to love someone who didn't even love themselves. And in those moments, she reminds herself, looking back only reopens wounds that were meant to close. Closure doesn't come from the other person. It comes from a decision to stop waiting for an apology, to stop hoping for understanding, to stop needing validation from someone who never saw her clearly. She creates her own closure the moment she says, I'm not available for this anymore. And she moves forward, not bitter, but better, not hardened, but wiser. This kind of strength is rare because most people they stay because it's familiar, because starting over is scary, because they believe they can't find better. But a high-value woman knows that staying in a place that's breaking her is far scarier than starting over. She trusts that walking away creates space for peace, for purpose, for people who match her energy. And she trusts herself to be okay, even when it hurts. When she walks away, she does it with grace. No revenge, no chaos, just clarity. Because she's not looking for closure, she is the closure. Her silence becomes the message, her absence becomes the boundary, and her peace becomes the proof that she made the right decision. She doesn't need to be understood. She doesn't need to prove her worth. She just needs to protect her energy. And walking away is how she does it. Not because she's weak, but because she's strong enough to stop trying to convince someone to value what they never deserved in the first place. So let them wonder, let them try to spin the story, let them say she just left, because what they won't say is how many chances she gave, how many times she stayed when she should have walked, how deeply she cared. They won't tell that part of the story, but she doesn't need them to, because she knows her truth. And that's all that matters. She walks away, not to hurt them, but to heal herself, and once she's gone, she's gone. Not physically, energetically. She no longer entertains, explains, or engages. She's not looking back, because what's behind her no longer deserves access to who she's becoming. Her future is calling, and this time she's answering with her head high, her heart intact, and her power fully reclaimed. When a woman chooses herself, fully, unapologetically, and without hesitation, she becomes unstoppable, not because she's louder, not because she's colder, but because she finally understands that her value was never tied to how much she endured, how long she stayed, or how deeply she tried to fix what was never hers to heal. She's not bitter, she's clear, she's not heartless, she's healed. She knows now that walking away doesn't make her a villain, it makes her wise. Protecting her peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Speaking her truth isn't aggressive, it's courageous. Setting boundaries without guilt isn't harsh, it's self-respect in action. And to every woman who has been made to feel too much for standing up or not enough for walking away, let this be your reminder. You don't need permission to own your space. You don't need to keep proving your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. The most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself and never apologize for it. You are not here to fix, to carry, to tolerate, or to shrink. You are here to rise. You are here to be whole. And when you stop chasing validation from toxic people, you give yourself the freedom to become the woman you were always meant to be, strong, steady, and completely untouchable.